Alone in the Dark. Written and directed by Quade Krulik. Narration and production by Trey Falco. Featuring Peter DeVries, Laura Krulik, and Caleb Putnam. The world is very empty. At the beginning of last year, everyone began vanishing from the earth. No one had an explanation as to why so many people were going missing. There's no trace of them, no signs of struggle, and as the year progressed, it started to become an epidemic. The world was so void of people that you could feel it. You could even feel the isolation. I could scream, and no one would hear it. As my time was spent simply trying to learn about the vanishings, I began to feel as though I was being watched. It wasn't long after that I started to see them. Black, hooded figures that were watching me. They never got too close, but they were clearly stalking me, and it would only be a matter of time till they struck. Their numbers increased, and their distance to me got closer. It was when I felt at my most vulnerable I learned how to survive them. I turned on the television to find a recorded message telling me that these figures would only get closer if I stayed in one place. I had to keep moving in order to keep them at bay. The recording told me to meet the broadcaster in Portersville. It wasn't far from where I had lived. I packed up what I could and hurried to meet him and his group. I've been living with the man who sent the broadcast, whose name is Charlie, and his group for almost a week. Charlie is married to a very nice lady named Karina. The leader of the group, and apparently the guy who came up with the idea to survive the black hooded figures, was named Brian. He seemed like a very stern guy. I learned that Brian and Charlie knew each other from before the vanishing crisis. Although Brian seemed to call the shots, Charlie seemed to have a pretty good voice in his ear about decisions. I quickly made friends with Charlie and Karina. I feel like I tried to be friends with them at first because Charlie's face was the only one that was familiar since he was the one that led me to Portersville. The friendship with Karina came about naturally after I befriended Charlie. I got to know the rest of the group fairly well, but no one I really felt a strong, undying connection towards. Our group performed our strategy fairly regularly in order to survive the hooded figures. It seemed it would take 2, maybe 3 weeks until we needed to change location to keep the hooded figures at bay. The problem was, all of the traveling that we were doing was taking a toll. It was getting close to summer again until we finally all had to have a serious talk about all the moving we were doing. The group ultimately fell to Brian's suggestion of staying on the move, but Charlie wasn't so convinced. Charlie felt as though we were missing a lot of valuable supplies that we weren't able to pick up because we kept on having to up and move. After the meeting, Charlie and I followed Brian to his room he had been sleeping in to have a more private conversation. Charlie wanted me to follow because he was a bit scrawny and didn't want to be alone, so he didn't feel intimidated.
Brian, I really think that the best move is to find a permanent solution.
I agree, Charlie, but what is the permanent solution here? The only thing I know to do is keep moving. The only reason I know to do that is because we started losing people and we thought maybe leaving was the best thing to do. Thank God we were right.
Okay, fair. But I knew the area we were in last fairly well, and Karina knew it even better. We missed so much supplies that we could have used just because we had to move.
Listen to yourself. Charlie, I agree we should find something with a little more staying power, but there's nothing we could do. I don't have an alternative. We don't have an alternative. If we stay put, I'm sure we'll find more food and water, but we'll be taken by those things. If we keep moving, we may miss some supplies, but at least we won't be taken.
Brian and Charlie bickered for almost an hour, but I couldn't seem to get on either one of their sides. Charlie was right. We needed to find something more solid that would allow us to catch our breath and gather supplies and potentially repopulate and rebuild our empty world. But Brian made a fair argument. The only way we knew to survive the hooded figures was to keep moving. Missing out on a meal seemed honestly a small price to pay to avoid vanishing. You know, it's more than a day's drive to the city. If we stay there, it'll be empty, so that means plenty of supplies and tons of places to move to so the hooded figures wouldn't get too close. I finally chimed in on the debate between Brian and Charlie. Both looked at me and then looked at me like I was teaching them about gravity. Charlie hugged me and called me brilliant. Brian simply nodded his head toward me. Anyone else would have thought it cold and distant, but that was just simply how Brian was. I knew he thought I had just provided a solution that it could allow our group to survive for quite some time. Karina and I were given the task of gathering the group together and all of our supplies for the trip. We were leaving our location sooner than we had other places, but everyone was more than compliant once we told them why we were leaving so soon. We were to leave the following morning. Charlie and Brian stayed to themselves most of the day, planning pretty much a month in advance our plan for the city. It was a big city, and we would be able to live there for probably years to come. At least, that's the way Charlie and Brian saw it. The following day, everyone was so loud in all the cars, talking about what we would do when we arrived. I just put my headphones in and began to kind of nod off here and there. Every so often, I would plug in my radio and try to find some broadcast on the AM frequency. It wasn't like you'd think I'd found a few channels that were still pretty active. Not many of them were actually official broadcasts anymore, but some were, which gave me a lot of hope. Especially since it was more than obvious how devoid of human life the world had become.
It has been confirmed that we are getting reports that the city of Beijing is erecting walls around the city borders. We can, however, confirm that the Chinese government has been forcing its citizens into the city limits so that they can keep a daily survey on how many citizens it still has. The United Kingdom has no longer been communicating with any known outlets, and it is believed that Great Britain is no longer populated. Reports continue to come in that the fire that started in Washington, D.C. has yet to be seized, but we cannot say when it will be extinguished, as we have not been hearing any reports from the D.C. area. We advise any who are moving or living in the area should stay clear of the capital at all costs.
I shut off the radio just as I noticed we were in the city and were passing by empty buildings and streets. It was so surreal to see the city I grew up in just so empty. It also gave me such a sense of hope and familiarity. I felt as though this was the beginning of a new. We would be able to live here and find a way to fight back against the force that was causing all of this madness. We found the office building that we were planning to stay in first. I went off on my own once we got settled in, looking at all the building had to offer. It was so neat to see everything that was left on people's cubicles and desks. I found tons of bobbleheads of baseball players and reality TV stars. I found family pictures of no one I recognized, but I felt no sorrow that they were now gone. I just felt alone. I walked over to the window and looked down at the street. We were on the 9th floor and we were pretty high up. I looked over and could see someone in the building over. It was a hooded figure. I didn't avert my gaze, trying to make him feel uncomfortable rather than let him make me feel scared. It looked like he looked up at me, but in typical fashion, I couldn't see his face. He turned and began to walk away. It was different this time. I didn't feel scared or even like I was in any real danger that time. I felt scared for my group slightly, but I felt as though he got nervous of me and began to leave. I didn't explore the building anymore. I went back with the group, talked with Charlie and Karina for a few hours, and then we went to sleep. I told no one about the hooded figure in the opposite building. The following day was beautiful. It was bright and sunny, and there was seemingly not a care in the world amongst the group. It felt so nice. The group divided up into smaller groups and split off to explore with walkie-talkies in hand. It was a pretty fast day, as I seemingly had already gone quite a few blocks from the office building we were staying in. I enjoyed the time alone, though. I was by myself with no group. It reminded me of the walks I would take when my hometown had become pretty empty and I was all by myself. It was the only good thing that had come out of the vanishing. I had walked for a while and was about to come to the end of the street. I rounded the corner and was stopped dead in my tracks. In front of me, there was a cafe full of people? The outside table was full of customers with casual clothes, men in suits, and women in dresses, even teenagers in jeans and t-shirts. It was fully staffed, giving out coffee and taking money. The customers were sitting at the tables, and I could audibly hear the clanks of the glass from the mugs and steam from the machines. I could hear people talking and conversing amongst themselves or even on their phones.
Hey, how are you?
I walked backwards, back around the corner, and stopped. And I stood still for a moment. And then I walked back around the corner, and the cafe was empty. No people were there. Old newspapers covered the chairs outside, and broken mugs and plates were all over the ground. I walked slowly toward the cafe and looked inside. I opened the doors and walked inside only to find more of the store in turmoil. The cash register was cleaned out. It was empty. I noticed that I had a pretty bad headache. I must have just been seeing things, but it was far too vivid to be my mind playing tricks on me. I must have been hallucinating. I left the cafe and started walking back to the office building to get some medicine to help my headache. By the time I had gotten back, Charlie and Karina had beaten me to the building. They looked over and smiled, but they could tell something was wrong when they saw my face.
Hey man, you feeling okay? You look really pale.
No, I feel fine. I just had a headache and it was killing me. I decided to come back here, but it's gone now. I calmed them down. I was convinced that what I saw was an impossibility, but that made me only more concerned because that meant I could be going crazy. I definitely didn't want that. I took some quick aspirin and decided to ignore the whole incident. I started to hope that I was going crazy because there was no other way I could explain why all those people were completely fine. They were acting like the city was busy and vibrant, but they weren't really there. How is that possible? I scanned the radio to keep my mind off of what had happened.
The final report from Russia was a faint voice that asked if anyone could call them on the satellite phone and frequently gave out the number over the broadcast. And that was the last thing that has come out of Russia. Unconfirmed reports are saying that Russia is no longer populated and has become void of people. Mass rioting has been reported throughout Beijing, and it has been speculated that what was left of the Chinese government has fallen. The Vatican released a statement today claiming that the Pope has gone missing and that there has been no trace of him. Some staff is saying that he has been gone for months. This directly conflicts with the fact that the Vatican has been making statements that the Pope has been active in his works during this crisis.
A few days had passed since I was at the cafe. I thought it best to go back and see if there was any reason to why I saw so many people acting normal other than myself slipping into madness. I arrived at the corner that I had rounded to see the cafe in the first place. I peeked around the corner, reminding myself of an old cartoon character trying to comically observe his surroundings. The cafe was empty. I don't know what I was expecting. I felt kind of let down when I saw the cafe desolate. It was such an experience the last time. I was hoping to feel the same kind of rush as the first time. Though I felt let down, I felt relieved. It could have easily just been my eyes playing some trick on me. I was a fan of going to coffee shops when I was feeling frisky. Perhaps my mind was trying to give me that memory back. I walked in the cafe, and it was the same as before, but I was able to gather more detail than last time. This time, I was calm and paying attention to the little details that surrounded me. I sat down at a table inside the cafe. The table I was at had a newspaper that had been left. I picked it up, but I didn't read any articles. I just stared at the printed letters and words. I appreciated its nostalgic value, almost like it was an artifact from a distant past that had been lost to us. The feeling felt more real in that moment than any other time I was in an actual museum. I looked over at the counter and shouted, "Can I get a latte with extra foam?" I laughed at myself. I stood up feeling better about the situation. As I walked out of the cafe, I could swear I heard something echoing in the city. It sounded like an animal whimpering, like it was hurt or something. I tried to listen as carefully as I could to pinpoint which direction it was coming from. I began to walk down the street from where I thought the noise was originating. I walked for a moment and then jolted down an alley where I thought the noise was coming from, more distinctly. The closer I got, the sound seemed more like it was coming from a machine, and it was reverberating. The noise would come in and then cut out, only to start once more. The closer I got, the more familiar the sound seemed. When I rounded the corner, it clicked, but I could barely keep my jaw up when my eyes caught the origin of the sound. There was a man trying to start up a car. The sound was the ignition trying to catch. The hood was popped and the car door was open. Just then, a man came from the driver's seat. He scratched the back of his head and whispered a loud curse towards the car. He seemed clean? The poor devil must have stocked up on some cleaning supplies and was just trying to smell good for the end of days. I could smell his cologne from where I was standing. He turned his body and spotted me, staring at his plight.
Hey man, you wouldn't be able to help me, could you?
Yeah, I'll help. I walked over to the car and took a quick look over the car. I asked the man to take his keys out of the ignition. The car looked sweet, almost brand new. I could hardly believe how clean the guy had kept it. I got even more impressed when I saw that the car didn't seem to have any problems under the hood, as far as I could tell. I sat in the driver's seat and asked for the keys.
Sure man, just don't drive off with it.
I plugged the key into the ignition when I noticed the interior of the car is pretty damn nice too. This guy was one lucky man to find such a nice car. I turned the key to just start the battery when I could see a small light come on. I smiled and looked at the man. When was the last time you filled this bad boy up?
Oh my god, I can't believe how stupid I am.
The man walked back to his trunk and opened it up. He pulled out a gas can and proceeded to fill up the tank. I began to walk off and the guy waved back to me. I asked if the man was alright from here.
Yeah man, I'll be fine, but damn, my boss is gonna kill me.
Yeah. Wait. What? I turned around as fast as I could as soon as I heard, but the man was gone. He had vanished into thin air. I looked down and I could see no trace of him. I inspected the car to see if he had gotten inside and I could just simply not see him. He was truly gone. The weirdest part was the car. The interior was dreadful. The seats were torn and it was covered in dust. I stepped back and it was clearly the same car. But it had changed. It went from looking fantastic to looking like it had been neglected for 10 years. Utterly freaked out by the situation, I started to move at a quick pace back to the building when I heard footsteps. I looked behind me and at the cafe where I saw all the people. Inside, there were at least a dozen hooded figures sitting at the tables. I panicked and started running as fast as my legs could carry. I looked all around me. I could see them in the windows of buildings all around me. Some were walking out of alleys as I passed by, adding to my fear. I had gotten careless. The figure I saw in the building across from me the other night, they had gotten close. Now they were so close, and there may be no way to stop them now. I finally arrived at the office building, and two figures stood on the sidewalk across from the building. I ran up, and no one was there. I cried out for Brian, Charlie, and Karina. All of their things were there, but the people were gone. I ran out and saw the same hooded figures across the street, and I started to run, but was stopped by a voice.
Do not run. We mean you no harm.
I froze. I slowly panned over to see that the figures had gotten closer. It didn't seem like they walked, just moved. Oh yeah? And how am I supposed to believe you?
If we wanted to cause you harm, we could have done it all along. We're not here to hurt your people. We're trying to save them.
You're lying. You've kidnapped my friends, my family, and everyone else on Earth. You're trying to destroy us.
That is not entirely accurate. We're trying to transition your species, but we have successfully done so with all other life. You are the last human on Earth.
I stood for a moment and then fell to my knees. I was the last person on Earth. Impossible. There should be at least a few thousand left. Millions, in fact.
You would think so, but we actually were able to take more people than was initially discovered. And we were able to take more than initially planned. Due to your large populace, we went virtually unnoticed.
You keep saying you aren't hurting people, or just transitioning them. What do you mean by that?
Your world is about to come to an end. due to a massive solar flare that will engulf and destroy your planet. We are creatures designed to protect humans by the one who manages us. In order to save your species, we have been taking your bodies and transferring you into a parallel universe that is safe from harm, effectively combining them and keeping the human race from destruction. We operate in secret. Our true purpose, even our existence, has had to remain a secret. We were discovered as fewer and fewer people lived in this world. Our overall mission had to remain a secret.
But wouldn't people remember things? Remember the vanishing crisis once they've been transferred to their counterpart?
Possible. And it is possible that they will discover that they have memories from a life that no longer exists. But it was a risk that we had to take. Our mission is to protect you. And this was the only possible method while maintaining the best amount of discretion. It was a risk we were willing to take in order to keep you safe.
What was that at the cafe? And the man at the car?
They were mere overlaps. You saw a universe where that coffee shop is still open for business, and people were going on about their day. The car was the same. You helped a man that was in a universe beyond your own. You disappeared to him as strangely as he did to you. He is actually telling his wife about it right now. He just arrived home from work.
Why are you telling me this? If your mission is supposed to be so secret, why are you spilling the beans with me, huh?
Because in the universe we hope to transfer you into, you do not exist. If we were to plant you in that universe, it would create an off-balance. If you were placed into that universe that you never existed, the humans there would notice and would question your existence. People would start to panic, and chaos would follow. In that universe, your parents never met. They married different people. You do not exist. And therefore, they can do nothing for you. You are unfortunately trapped here.
You will die on this earth.
You will die on this earth.
I was in shock of what the hooded figure was telling me. It was all just too unreal. I was so scared of dying and dying all alone.
We do, however, wish to offer you an alternative.
I looked up and stared at the hooded figure with hope.
We are willing to completely strip you of your body. And the one who manages us is willing to take you early. He is your creator. You will be able to see the beginning, the ending. All that has been created will be yours to see with him.
I sat there and thought. It felt like forever, but it wasn't long at all. Hard choice, total destruction, or eternal knowledge was what I had to work with. I nodded my head. The figure nodded his and turned, then walked away. The figure that stood next to him walked to me and covered my eyes with his hand, but instead of darkness, I was blinded by light. I was floating and I could see everything. The stars, the planets, and even time were visible. I could see the beginning. I could see the end and everything in between. I could see the one who created me, and I could only humble myself. I felt his judgment for all that I had done wrong, but in the end, I felt his embrace. He had forgiven all of my transgressions, and I would live here for the remainder of time itself. In this, I felt what I had known all my life and what was shown to me all along. Even in my darkest hour, I was never alone. Alone in the Dark. Written and directed by Quade Krulik. Narration and production by Trey Falco. Featuring Peter DeVries, Laura Krulik, and Caleb Putnam.